Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Class
Morning.
4, I believe, which is crazy. Already halfway into this. And yeah, hopefully you guys are learning a lot, trying a bunch of new things. I know there's some frustration, and that's always the case with, whenever we're experimenting with new ways of painting. What does that look like? Let's see. So let's go ahead and quickly hop over and look at the work that we did this week. So I'm going to do share screen and get over to our Facebook, I hope. Great. All right, everybody should be seeing the Facebook page. Correct?
Yep. Yep. For Susan. I see it.
Look at all that work. You guys have been super busy. Fantastic. All right. And I didn't really see who was all here. Leslie, you are here. Are you hearing me, Leslie? And actually, I'm going to jump.
I can hear you. Yes.
I'll come right back to you, Leslie. I'm going to jump to Kate because Kate has like five more minutes before she has to run away. And Kate, I think this one I'm pointing at is one of yours.
Yes, and the one to the right of it also.
Okay, great.
And then one down below, but that's okay.
Okay, which one did you want to talk about first?
The one that you haven't gotten a picture of yet, it's down below.
Okay,
Yeah.
this one?
Yeah, no, the one to the right of that one.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So today's exercise will actually help with this very painting. We're going to be talking about the 4 values in landscape painting. John F. Carlson, famous book on landscape painting, talks about that. And we will be using that to kind of check our work. This painting has a lot of goodness going on for it, beautiful colors, a nice sense of movement and everything else. What's your question about it? Just so I make sure I answer that.
I don't know. That's the problem. I just don't like it. I don't know why I don't like it. I like the other 2, but
Great.
This one I just don't like.
Okay, well, good. That's a good first step, right? We want to just kind of look and say, is it making me comfortable? Am I happy with it? Is it working? And, and a lot of times we can't quite figure out. In fact, the big painting that's behind me has been one that I've been struggling with, and I'm not quite sure what I'm not liking about it, but it's you just keep asking, keep diving in deeper. And I will tell you what I think is missing very easily in this is that you have nice structure on these trees. You've got a nice sense of light here, but then in your grasses, all of that just kind of goes away. In fact, some of your lightest grasses are right here. And what are they? They are facing away from, if you can imagine all of this in a 3-dimensional space, they are facing away from the light.
Oh, I see. I thought they'd be catching the light.
The sun is behind them.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, if you come in and darken some of this, darken some of this, and then darken that band right there, you will all of a sudden find this picture just lies right back down and all of a sudden makes sense, because all of this is kind of working together pretty well. But down here, it just seems like a whole different painting, a whole different space. And it's a lot more wishy-washy and kind of soft.
Okay.
So that will be that. Your water is quite a bit lighter than your sky. Also maybe part of it.
Okay.
Generally, our water will reflect a little bit darker than the lightest lights and a little bit lighter than the darkest darks.
Okay.
That's just kind of a general idea for waters.
Okay.
Let's pop back up here real quick. Wow, this is a rough photo, but I think I see what's going on. Looks like you got a lot of nice paint on there. Built up your structures. When I squint my eyes at it, I'm looking for the value structure. Do the darks kind of hold together and the lights kind of hold together? And for the most part, they do, especially again in the top half where you got these really strong, dark silhouetted trees against this nice, warm, bright sky. Down below, it becomes a little more scattershot, where light kind of is here, it's a couple dots here, then it's here. So you might kind of want to figure out, just imagining, because I know you probably can't see it, where is the light? Is it actually, these are probably in shadow. If the light's kind of coming from behind, it looks like maybe the light's coming from the left a little bit because it's catching the left side of this tree.
Yeah, it's actually kind of right behind that tree.
Behind this one?
Yeah, kind of in toward the center where that light yellow is. That right about there, yeah, above.
Okay, so then, yeah, you just want to see, like, this looks like it has kind of a cast shadow, whereas this tree doesn't really seem to. You do have a nice cast shadow, but underneath this white bush, and then kind of behind these golden grasses. But you just kind of want to imagine, where is my light, and is it casting a shadow? Is it a strong light? Is it a soft light? Kind of a diffused light. And we'll be looking at that actually starting next week a little more. We're going to be looking at value keys starting next week. Yeah, the top half works pretty well for me. I think you and I have talked about that a couple of times as kind of, first question, and I don't have my checklist out and about, but my first question on my checklist for myself that I usually have up in my studio is, where is the light? Where is the light source? This one does seem to have a couple light sources, kind of, or an indecisive light source. So I think by just kind of deciding that and figuring out what would actually be in shadow, what would be in light, might help you there. But again, the top half works quite well. Bottom half becomes a little bit
Confused.
little confused and a little bit broken up as well.
Yeah, I liked my black and white, and I almost wish I'd kept it.
I bet you if you just glazed over this with some of your greens or yellows and didn't just have a blue spot kind of.
Well, those were supposed to be Queen's Anne lace. That's what they were supposed to be.
Yeah, it's just it's not working in this environment. You see how it's just like the only really cold thing.
Yeah.
And that blue, I mean, it could work, and you could always have, like, it doesn't look like Queen Anne's lace for some reason. But it does look like a
snowball bush.
Yeah, I was thinking like a rhododendron, not a rhododendron, but what's the other one?
Hydrangea?
Yeah,
it looks like a hydrangea bush.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm hoping you'll help us with foregrounds, because that's where I seem to struggle the most, is foregrounds. So
great. Well, I hope so too. I will try to remember to think and talk about that a little bit. What happens here is all of a sudden, because this blue is the only real strong blue, it becomes a focal point in a way, right? It really draws my eye down in here. It kind of shoots through, and then now I'm in this area, which I think your focal point's probably more in this area. So anyways, that may be a good use for glazing. Try glazing into it with some green, or even I bet you some yellow, and a lot of those will turn towards greens. And then just big note to yourself, all cap letters, where is my light source? That is your first question.
Yep.
All right. And this works so much better. You got the shadows on the right sides of the grass. You got this very distinct light source, and everybody's listening to this light, right? Your hill is warmest underneath it. Your grasses are, look like they're top lit from it. Your shadows are have logic to them. Your sky. So this one actually holds together really nice. It's a very soft and almost pastel-y kind of washed out feel to it, but it's very nice. I mean, it works. It feels very cohesive. And yeah, any thoughts on this one real quick, Kate, before you have to run off?
No, although the colors in the photo aren't quite the same as, they never are. But,
Sure.
but yes, but thank you. I have to leave. So thank you so much, Michael. And thank you everybody for allowing him to critique me first. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
Okay.
No problem. Bye, Kathleen.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's pop over to Leslie. Leslie, doing some watercolors, looks like. Are you there, Leslie? I think you're muted if you are there.
I am here. It's an acrylic base, so I painted the whole thing in black and white acrylic. And then I put watercolor over it because I'm not an oil painter. I'm a water-based painter. So you're right.
How was that?
It's very cool because there are a couple things I wanted out of your class, which was looking for where darks should be and how to use them. So with this particular sketch, I learned quite a bit that I've probably forgotten, but needed to remember again. And also I was in Baker where they have huge skies like this. And I came back wanting to paint those skies, but not knowing how to do it. So this is fun.
Yeah, I mean, you are officially my first student to ever do an acrylic underpainting with a watercolor over the top. Not something I would have
Well,
thought.
sorry about that, but I'm interested in the tonalism approach. And so what I try to do is paint right with you. And it works because I have enough experience to be able to do sort of what you're doing, and then I can touch it up later. And I've done a lot of acrylic painting with watercolor over it. So I really am enjoying it. It's just, I have to think differently than you when you're doing it. Not so about the structure or values, but what goes down first and how it's applied.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. Yeah, well, thank you for doing that. I actually really enjoy it, and I think it's kind of an interesting. I don't do straight watercolors ever, but I do a gouache and watercolor mix. And when
Yeah.
my sketch pads, and I'm really enjoying that, where I use a couple colors in gouache, and I use white gouache, and then because it's opaque, and then I'll use the watercolors colors, out of the tube, not out of the pan. Mixed in with my gouache to kind of color them up and stuff. And that's been a lot of fun, experimenting and playing with, and just really can lay things in nice and quickly. And again, with the gouache, I can do some layering, just because it speaks more towards my background with oil paints and even acrylics.
Right.
Very cool. So is this the reference that I gave you?
It is a reference. And all the
And then you
dark
kind of made a nice tall crop out of it.
Well, I used a different shape paper, so we're getting a different effect, right? But I painted it just as you were doing it on the board. I just had a much more narrow piece of paper, and it changed what it looks like to some degree.
Very cool. Well, that's a lot of fun. Yeah, so my one quick critique is that your clouds are basically very symmetrical on each side, almost like triangle, triangle, triangle. And that's cool if you are doing that purposely and for design, but it doesn't look as organic as maybe it could. It's got a very,
I would agree.
Geometric, I guess, is a way of thinking about it. But this is a painting about triangles. If you look at it, triangle, triangle, and then up in the sky, triangle. So it's very interesting. And if you just told me, you know what, I'm doing it as a designer and I wanted it to be more geometric, and that, I would be like, good job, then you did it. But if it was accidental.
No, it was when I'm painting with you, I have to, and especially if you're an acrylic, you get what you get. You don't get to change too much of it.
Right.
And so I got more V's in there than probably should be in there.
Cool. All right, well, nicely done. Let's see your other one real quickly here. Yeah, see, much more organic and naturalistic feeling. This one speaks a little bit to the other reference that I had with the big S curve and stuff, but this is much more naturalistic and marsh-like, and then your mountains are much more severe and beautiful, or interesting than. I don't know if you painted this one along with me as well, or is this a different reference?
I did, and I made, the river's not the right shape,
That's
but then
okay.
once I had it right. So I did paint it along with you, and I was trying to make it look naturalistic as opposed to tonalistic.
Oh.
But every time I do one of these, I really want to learn how to do a river that disappears into the horizon. And you've had a couple of designs of that kind. And so this is my first attempt to make that work. And I was more focused on that than I was focused on anything else, actually.
Good. And I like this. I mean, I like the naturalistic feel. And I mean, this just feels like, you know, you could see it a lot more often than that perfect S curve that I presented in the reference. Yeah, and I like your mountains. I mean, they remind me kind of the Rockies, or, you know, up in northern Washington and stuff. Yeah, it's got a nice feel to it. This one feels much more organic and naturalistic and comfortable. So yeah, any
Thank
questions or
you. That's
thoughts
very
on
kind of
this?
you. No, I know I missed the S curve, so I'll go back and do it again. And I know I didn't get the sky and the other one the way I wanted, but these first attempts I've discovered are often way off from what the teacher wants. But when I go back the second time, I can oftentimes execute it the way the teacher would prefer.
Absolutely. Perfect. No, I really appreciate that. And treating it as kind of a preliminary sketch, I think is wonderful. All right, let's see who we got over here. Susan, how you doing? Are you?
I don't like it, but I really enjoy the critiques. I learned so much on each student that you critique. I agree with Leslie, even though we used a different media. With the acrylic, you get what, as she said, get what you get. I liked my black and white. I hate this one. I don't have a picture. I do have a picture posted from last week, the black and white.
Go ahead, keep ducking. See if I can just find it real quick.
Yeah, I put my palette like yours, Michael. The colors, the transparent. Is this it right over here? No, that might be it. Looks like it. No, it's not. No, that's not mine. The bottom line is, this is it right here. I think maybe it's the acrylic paint, said cheap acrylic paint. Maybe it's acrylic paint. It was too dark to start out with. Okay. For this one, I concentrated on the diagonals because that's what we were talking about 2 weeks ago. However, when I went back and forth during the week at different times, because I used your transparent palette, okay, but I couldn't seem to manage covering the darks, and I wondered if my black and white was too dark. And then I got, I loved the assignment, and I used your resource, and it was really fun to learn it. I just couldn't control it. It was just so out of my control. It just got real dark, and I lost.
Yes. So I think I talked about that during the class, that it gets muddy really fast.
Yeah, really.
So yeah, anytime you introduce, you know, all three primaries, if you're mixing with multiple colors, so in fact, after the work class, I actually wiped mine completely back off. Yeah, I just had been doing too much, and so I just went back in and glazed it with one single color, and then I'll paint over the top of that with my oils. So generally, when I do a black and white and glaze in, I do not add that many colors. I'll just do one, maybe two colors, and then that will dry really quickly. Like, you know, by the next day or even that afternoon, I can paint right back into it. And so yeah, I should have probably made that a little more clear. I think it's a good experiment, a good experience, because you're learning about glazing.
Absolutely.
And seeing the transparency of the paint. But yeah, and transparent paint won't cover black. Like, really, you'll have to go in with opaque paint. So all of this you can paint completely back over now with opaque oil. So that's the big thing. As far as
Michael, I wanted to just say one thing. It really got out of control for me with the middle part, the road, because that was a big black thick thing. I couldn't get it uncovered with black, let's put it that way.
Yeah. So yeah, going from the darks, and that's one thing I'm still working with. Again, this whole painting with black and white acrylics is kind of an underpainting, is fairly new to me. And like I said, I'm always surprised how much darker they dry. And so I'm still adjusting and learning that. Like, I should probably just never use pure black. I should probably be graying down my darkest dark, and just with the knowledge that it'll get darker. And then again, if I glaze into it, it's going to get darker again. So Yeah, it's still experimenting. Yeah,
Yeah.
the key I wanted you guys to see was the value structure, the big shapes, and then the ability to just experiment a little bit with glazing. Again, that's generally done either slower, not with very many colors, even like Maxfield Parrish and artists that made their whole career out of glazing. And they did it very slowly. They would do 1 or 2 colors maybe, and then let that dry, and then another, then colors over the top of that. So it's, if you're just going to be coloring with glazes, it's a very meticulous process and very time consuming. So just be aware of that. So typically what I have been doing is just my black and white, and then I'll just paint over it. If I do glaze into it, a lot of times I'm just going to use like my burnt or my earth red transparent color or my Indian yellow, something just to kind of harmonize it and give it a little bit of warmth. And then I'll just literally paint completely over that. So yeah, real quickly, design wise, I do notice your horizon line.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, is that, it's, I see now it's on an angle.
Oh, but it's also a 50-50 split.
Oh, God, yes, you're
So
right.
nothing is special here. You haven't told me, is this a sky, a painting about an interesting sky or a painting about interesting ground?
I like the lake.
What's that?
I like only the lake in that picture.
There you go. Yeah, so just usually, I'll put the ground, not at 50%, not halfway up or halfway down.
You're right. I see.
That's the general rule, especially when it's going to be a big split like this. If you had a big tree or something that was, cutting in, it becomes a little less important. But when it's truly just the landscape shooting across, it gets a little tougher.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Richard, you here?
Yes, I am.
Great. Trying to find you here on the student group here.
I did 3 glazes and wiped them off. And finally, this is the 4th one and I gave up. It started getting all muddy on me.
Yeah. So basically all the things that I was just saying to Susan, hold true. And I apologize if I wasn't as clear as I should have been. I think when in the future, when I do glazing over black and whites, I'm just going to do a single color, maybe 2 colors. Because as soon as you introduce, all 3 primaries or any like tertiary colors, meaning like browns and, colors that are already mixed, they just continue to muddy up everything. So, I mean, this doesn't seem too muddy to me, but with full knowledge, Richard, that you can, do you like to be called Rick or Richard? Rick, with full knowledge, Rick, that you can go over and completely paint over this. I would still just kind of treat this like the underpainting, like something to build on top of. So hopefully, again, that wasn't too confusing. Your black and white, I saw it just a little bit ago. I clicked on it.
Yeah, that's what frustrated me because I like the black and white.
Yeah.
But when I went to do it, was like I got all confused when I was doing the glaze.
Yeah, totally. So wouldn't that be nicer if it was just all one color, just with your values, and then you come back in and paint over it, or if you just painted directly over it, or if you just started a second painting and just said, you know what, I like this design, I will keep that and then start my next painting in color, doing something like that. And that's kind of a little bit of what I do. A lot of my sketches and stuff will be kind of in black and white and done really quickly. I have a number of little of grayscale sketches that I do pretty quickly. So imagine if this was like a 4-inch by 5-inch and you just kind of knock that out and went, you know what, that looks really nice. I can now just jump over to my bigger canvas, say my 16-inch by 20-inch canvas, and I can use that design and introduce my colors and everything else.
Yeah, this is a little 8x6, which I do most of my studies.
Perfect.
And then just blow it up from there.
All right, well, good. So it's still, experimenting and playing. So if you want to come back over now with opaque paint, was I not clear at all about that? I did see some people painted opaquely over the top of their glazing. Just knowing that the glaze, especially that first glaze, is not the end all be all by any means. That is just still the beginning of the painting.
Right.
Great. Great. Any questions for me? Rick?
I have that bright yellow one down there. That one, yeah.
All right.
I hated the underpainting, and it actually turned out better than I expected, but the row of trees on the left are way too dark.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it still works because they're quite close. You know, this isn't a huge jump from these to here, whereas it's a much bigger jump from these trees to this band of trees, and that works pretty well. Yeah, it actually reads nice. Your colors, if I squint my eyes, you got nice big shapes. They read well together. I really like this gold, beautiful color. And it plays so nicely against your kind of purpley blues up in the sky. One thing is just, it's a little bit spotty in the foreground. You got dark spot, you know, kind of dark spot.
Right, yeah.
I usually will try to kind of either link them or give them kind of a reason, not just spots. You know, are they leading me somewhere? What are they doing? You know, why is it so dark here? So
Right.
just asking questions like that. And then a very minor thing, maybe just trying, just the bottom of this feels a little bit bumpy. And I don't know, I mean, that could work where you have taller grasses and shorter grasses kind of over the fronts of this group of trees. But yeah, this one works. I mean, your colors are nice. Your shapes are pretty good. If I were being really nitpicky, you got one tangent right here.
Right,
Right
yeah.
at the top. So if you just took that up just a touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Is this one you might go back into? and
Well,
actually more sure
I
what-
hated the underpainting, and I was surprised it turned out as well as it did. Because I didn't know what to do in the front part, and that's why it ended up being all spotty. Yeah, I think if I did it again, it would turn out a lot better.
Yeah, and again, you can also still just come over it with opaque paint, you know, using your oil paints like you normally would.
Right,
Kind of come in and add to. And it looks like you did like with the Queen Anne's lace. Looks like you kind of brought those back in over the top. And so you're definitely getting some of that going on.
right.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, lots of good stuff going on. It has a nice feel to it. It almost, you know, leans in an abstract kind of way, which I kind of like. I definitely have been enjoying a lot more abstract landscapes lately. Kind of finding myself gravitating towards other artists who are doing that. And where are we at? We are, yeah, here. All right, Renita, are you here today? Yep, there you are. Okay, man, you like to challenge me. All right. Good. I see a pond, some trees, like the bottom of a mountain or hills, and maybe grass, maybe water. I don't know.
This is water,
Okay.
and this is a piece of land that was sand and really stood out. So
Okay, well, let's go look at your color. Yeah, not always easy to tell in black and white. All right. So this is sand here.
yeah,
Okay. And you got a nice little tree playing peekaboo here. You got reflections. All right, tell me, what are your thoughts? What was your process? And did you hate it? You hate me? Did you enjoy it? I'm the best.
I mean, after I did the ones from class, I wanted to try one totally on my own, and I picked something kind of complex. So, but I was trying to stick with tonalism for the most part, and all blues and yellows and greens. It didn't quite make it, but yeah, it was just a new attempt, something different on my
Yeah.
own.
Good. Well, I can see the very transparent paint in areas where you definitely use the transparency of the paint, and then more opaque paint where you came back, or, you know, just use thicker paint. I love that combination. You know, I think that's a great experimentation, and hopefully there were some things in there that happened that you're like, oh, I could use this, you know, later, or other things you're like, okay, I won't be doing that again. Yeah. And yeah, I can definitely read it much better with color. Sometimes, yeah, values are just not enough. I mean, because I wasn't sure, yeah, if this was water. This looks like the water because it's so bright. But then when
Right.
you can see, oh, okay, yeah, that's sand, just warm, bright sand. Very cool. And did you have another one as well?
Oh, I really hate the other one. I did one, you know, from the class picture. And I don't even see it for sure. Yeah, and I hated the black and white because I didn't realize I wasn't using titanium and I couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with the white and why it wouldn't work. So
It was a
yeah,
transparent
so yeah, so starting with that was really hard.
yeah.
And then I just when I did the lavender and stuff on the trees, it just they don't look like trees at all anymore. Suddenly the things in the front seem too short. I don't know. It was just the composition more than anything.
Right. Well, I do appreciate again you trying and experimenting with it. You know, it's an odd way to paint, anyways, going with the black and white acrylic underpainting. But it's a great way to kind of knock out like, does the value structure of this design work? Is it worth pursuing? And you know, other things like that. So I appreciate you at least getting to experiment with the glazing and different ideas. Yeah, it looks like I really kind of misled you guys by kind of going overboard with my colors last time. Again, I think it's easier if we just do less colors in the initial stage or one color or whatever else. But anyways, I think that was a good opportunity to try something different,
Oh,
experiment.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a real learning experience and just getting the idea of the control of the tissue paper was as hard as the brushwork. It's like how tough, you know, strong to rub and directions and yeah. So
Great. Yeah, good. Well, yeah, I really do commend you for playing along and trying it. And I won't be doing probably black and white underpaintings again in the class unless towards the end it's something you guys would like me to revisit. But I just wanted to show it to you guys as a way to do kind of tests or to start your underpainting, just to lay down a strong structural element. So anyways, very nice. And okay, reference photo. Thank you, Michelle. And then yours. And that's interesting that you took a horizontal design and did it vertically. Very nice.
Yeah, it was, but it was okay.
What's that?
Yeah, I just kind of, yeah, I did that sort of in my mind because I wanted, I think the one you did was vertical.
It was, yeah. Yep. So cropped off the side and you did. I like your road very much. That reads really nicely. And I mean, it looks like you've got a kind of a band of like wildflowers or something. It's really nice colors going on. Yeah, well, tell me a little bit about your process and what you enjoyed, and maybe what you learned through less enjoyable means.
I did the Indian yellow glaze and wiped it off. And then I went back in and just tried with the paints on top, the oil paints.
Was the Indian dry at that point? The Indian yellow?
It was.
Oh, great. Okay, so good. And that's probably because Michelle's been in my classes a couple times and has tried this before. But yeah, it's probably easier with just a single or two colors, isn't it, Michelle?
Yeah, very much so. And then like you always say, it unifies the painting.
Yes. Yeah, you can see all these harmonizes. Yeah, you can see all the little warm areas where, you know, the paint isn't as thick over the top. And it kind of creates this kind of warm undertone that kind of comes through in the painting in subtle ways. And you're able to cool it down, you know, by just putting more paint over the top, or you can let it be more transparent, you know, whatever colors you put on top, and it shows through. And yeah, very nice. Did you enjoy working this way? Is this something you might revisit, Michelle?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I have enjoyed that. I find it helpful. I have that one part under the tree on the left. In the reference photo, it looks the light. I think I tried to match the light and the dark, but now it looks like a bare spot under the tree. Yeah, right in there. If you look at the reference photo, you can see what I was trying to do, but somehow that looks too flat.
Yeah, and that could be really due to the fact that it's just a light colored bunch of weeds there or whatever else, or, you know, a lighter color dirt. I don't know. It's a wildlands, you know, wetlands area. So yeah, I probably might adjust that, you know, just bring this color back in. If it bothers you. It doesn't really bother me too much. I think this really works quite nicely. Yeah, it's got a nice harmony. When I squint my eyes at it, nothing really jumps out. That's always kind of a nice test. Is anything really out of place? And this is actually going to work with today's lessons about basically the 4 values, meaning the sky. And if you have water, oftentimes the water reflection will be your lightest. Second lightest is your flat areas, the tops of things. And then your darkest areas will usually be the shadow uprights. And then as things recede into space, hills or trees will get to the slightly lighter than your uprights. So that reads well, nicely done. And Yvonne, how you doing? Showing us your reference here. Beautiful sunrise. So this is that same exact wetlands, just a slightly different view. You can see I was a little crooked when I took the photo. And there you go. Are you here, Yvonne? I thought I saw you.
I am here.
Great. All right. Tell us a little bit about your experience here with this.
Well, I have always glazed toward the end of a painting, doing the opaques first and then glazing on top.
Yeah, which is much
So
more.
this was like writing left-handed. It was a very strange feel to me to start out with the glazes, and then I'd usually just obliterate them.
Yeah.
I did a lot of wiping off, and anyway, it is what it is. The field is way too light for the sky, so I'll need to come back and glaze that down. And the flowers are too light on the left also.
Yeah, but it strangely kind of works. It has a nice poetry to it in a way, where it kind of feels, I mean, you're right. This is too bright and too light, but almost works. And the grasses, you know, are really quite a bleached blonde appearance sometimes out there. So they are tough to paint and tough to read sometimes, kind of like sand or, you know, yeah, light colored paths and stuff sometimes do that. Nicely done. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your glazing, how you've used glazing in the past?
Happy to. After the opaques have dried, actually, let me back up a little. With the darks, I would start a painting with transparent darks, and then my lights would be opaque and thick. After the painting is completely dry, then I'd come back in and glaze over the lights, anything that needed to be toned down or altered a little in hue or value. The glazing would be subtle. It would be more oil rich than what you were doing.
Yes. If you're going over the top of paints that are already thicker, you're going to either want to use more oil or more medium. Yes. And by that, I would mean like the Galkid gel or the liquid or whatever it is. Perfect. That's exactly how I was kind of taught to do glazing, and how I've used it is I will go back in towards the end and adjust. So let's just say that Yvonne decided she wanted these grasses to either be, you know, a little bit darker. They could be greener, they could be red or brown or whatever color, even purple or blue, you know, to make it feel like more early morning or whatever else. So you can just take a transparent glaze and drag it across, and you can adjust things. But the same, just like we did with this first exercise, is if you add, you know, let's say Yvonne thinks that, you know, I want a little orange here and a little blue here. Well, if the orange and blue touch, they're going to go brown, even in the glaze. So just being aware that, you know, if, yeah, it will, the colors work just the same. So if it's a transparent red over a previous yellow area, it'll go towards orange. If it's a yellow over a blue area, it'll go towards green. So just be aware of that as you're glazing, if you ever want to use glazing. And maybe I will, so not next week, but the week after, I should have some paintings that are dry enough that I can maybe use some of those as examples of how glaze is more typically used. So yeah, great. I think it's a really nice piece. You have a nice touch with your trees and your brushwork. I love your little, I love the diversity in the size and the movement in these trees. Flowers. Feels very naturalistic. It's just not dot, dot, dot. You're using all sorts of different shapes, even within your little spots here.
I did that with spattering.
Oh, very nice. Man, you're brave. Good. You just kind of block off the area you don't want to get spattered, or?
Well, I didn't block it off, so I had some little wipeouts that I had to do.
Great. Nice. Anybody else have anything to add here as we, I think, are just about, did I get to everybody? Renita, one more. Did we talk about this one? This is from last week. Great, nice colors. I love the warms and stuff in here. Good. I think we already talked to Renita a little bit, but that's nice. I love your foreground colors in that one.
Thank you.
Diane, are you here? Yep, there you are. Hi, Diane.
I'm here.
Great. So this looks like a perfect, these look like such nice underpaintings. You do have some beautiful glowing areas that are happening here. But I think these will be really nice to go in, and it looks like you're starting to build up your paint thicker in certain areas. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your experience and what's going on here. Looks like you're painting on a very slick board.
Yeah, I'm painting on ampersand boards.
Yeah.
I got too much of the acrylic, the dark underneath, so I had to really struggle with it. But I really like the one on the right. I think that one turned out pretty good. I could add some more color to them, but I decided just to do like one layer. And then the road on the one on the left, I have to fix that because it looks like the car would fall right off.
Kind of leaning towards us a little
Yeah,
bit.
it's leaning a little bit too far.
That's
Other
funny.
than that, it was a fun. I've never done a black and white underpainting with acrylic before, so that was interesting. I usually use I like to use casein, and I usually use like alizarin crimson for my underpainting if I do something that dries.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that, you can do like the, acrylic painting with like an alizarin crimson or a dark red of some sort, and it really does nice things. I've actually enjoyed using burnt umber as my acrylic color underneath. I just wanted to show black and white just because it's the most understandable, and everybody probably has black and white paint. But yeah, this is really nice. How did the ampersand take the acrylics?
Ampersand grabs it quite a bit, so
Oh, good.
sometimes I just have to use a little bit more water, or sometimes I use a gel, acrylic gel.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, you got some really interesting different effects in here. You can definitely tell that the surface was different and your approach was a little different. It's an interesting combination of thin and thick paint that I think somebody you know, with some experimentation could do some really interesting things. I mean, you're getting some really different types of textures than I've really seen. So I don't know if you enjoyed that or if that's something that or were you fighting that, or, you know, yeah, you definitely have these really interesting technique or textures.
I think that's because I mostly do pastel.
Ah, interesting.
I'm all about marks.
Yeah, well, that's fun. Yeah, my friend Brenda Boylan that I paint with quite a bit, she is a pastelist who's now doing probably mostly oils. I shouldn't say that, but she paints a lot of oils, at least when she's with me. And she is so into the marks. Yeah, a lot of her brush strokes are very independent, you know, just like a pastelist would do, putting down each kind of mark and filling in, you know, the area. And it's always interesting to see how we'll go out and paint the same spot. In fact, that's very wetlands that you're painting here, and how different our paintings will end up. Yeah, I'm really intrigued by aspects of this and what's going on. I agree with you. I think the one on the right's a little more, is working a little better for whatever reason. Maybe it's because your yellow brick road here is leaning a little bit, road of gold. But yeah, you got some really interesting areas. So very cool. Thank you so much for doing that, for sharing it. And yeah, do you think you'll go back over and continue painting into those, or are you just going to let those be as they are?
Oh, I'm going to change it, yes.
Go
I
back
couldn't
and
hear you. I couldn't hear you.
No problem. No problem.
Diane, may I ask, I was wondering what color the tree is so pretty. It almost looked like a photograph, that gold tree. How did you achieve that?
Yeah, it's really wild, isn't it? So glowy.
Oh, it's just gold ochre.
Gold ochre. Okay, so that's some of the color I was using actually in my
Right.
glaze. Okay, great. So what are we at? 9:47. Are you guys good to hang out for a little bit more before we take our first break? And I wanted to talk a little bit about well, let's see if I can find it actually. Talk a little bit about the 4 values in landscape. Might actually just be easier if I show you, and then we'll go and look at some albums. I went ahead and opened up a new album, started a new album. They're not all tonalist paintings. Whoa, where'd that go? And let me grab a painting example. All right, I'm gonna take back the video really quickly here. I think. Stop share. Hey, there we are. And I'm just going to show you guys a little bit about what I'm talking about. So today we're going over the 4 values of landscape painting. If you've been in any of my classes, you've probably heard me talk about that. And these are just some really quick paintings I did in previous classes. I didn't want to use much time doing just kind of really simplistic versions, but for any of you that would like to do some really nice kind of clean, simple ones, these are actually black and white paintings with glazing over the top. You can tell I kept my glazes very simple. The top one is just a little bit of red with a little bit of yellow gold or kind of ochre. And the bottom one is basically green and just a touch of pink for interest, a little bit of pink for interest. But what I want to draw your eye to is the 4 values. All right, so we've got the top one, or the bottom one here is the lightest value, of course, is generally, these are very much, keep in mind, generally, the lightest area is the sky. That is the source of the light. Okay, that makes sense. And then, you know, if your water is reflecting your sky, of course, it'll be quite light as well. Then you have the flat planes that are getting the most of the light. So that'd be the tops of things or the grasses or whatever else. So you get the lightest light. And then the second one the lightest light. Then the second value is generally the flat plains. All right. Our third lightest is generally going to be the mountains that are far back. Another way to think of it is things that are at like a 45-degree angle versus flat to the light that are at a 45-degree angle. And that will read nicely. And then our darkest darks are generally our upright planes. So, and we're thinking about the shadows oftentimes in that. So you see how that reads really well? It's like almost a cheat sheet to making a landscape painting. It, of course, you know, even trying to find references, it doesn't always work like that. It's, in fact, it was kind of hard for me to find references. Part of the reason is because I don't paint midday very often. I paint, you know, sunrise and sunset. So that definitely distorts this. And what I really realized as I was preparing for this class this time is that I really only worry about the three values: the sky, the flat plains, so it can be sky and water, the flat plains, and my upright plains. The mountains or things in the distance, I usually kind of play by ear, because it's not always that they're, you know, exactly in between the values. So I don't worry about my mountain values as much, but it's a good rule of thumb. So a lot of times when I've got a landscape that is not working, like I'm just looking at it and I can't figure out, you know, I know some of you guys kind of mentioned that today. If I'm not quite sure what's going on, I will run this test by it, this 4-value test, and say, you know, and a lot of times, in fact, the first reference that I'm going to use today has this, and I'll show it to you here in just a second, where my flat plains and the hills in the back are almost exactly the same value. So I will adjust one of those to make it read better, either lighten one or darken one to make it read more true and to make it not look so flat. So it'll give it a sense of depth. So here's a simpler version with handy dandy numbers. Are those numbers backwards for you?
No, they read
Oh,
fine.
they're fine.
Oh, okay. For some reason, my screen is showing me everything in reverse. This is actually the reference I'll be kind of using today. That's funny. So this is, you know, your kind of super happy generic landscape. You know, who doesn't want to live there? You got a nice creek, you got a view of the mountains, nice flat ground for your animals to eat off of, and you have this nice apple tree that's, you know, right there. And so it's a very easy read, right? The brightest bright reflected in there, the second value. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then without the numbers on the bottom, you can still kind of see what's going on there. So does that make sense, you guys? How it's just kind of, again, it's almost like a cheat sheet for doing landscape painting. It was also interesting as I really was scouring my references and different, you know, images I've borrowed from other artists or grabbed from other artists that I find inspiring. And so many of the tonalist paintings don't often have hills in them. I hadn't really realized that it's usually sky, trees, and ground, and then maybe some trees further back. So it actually took me a while to go back and find references that had good hills in them. So just be aware of that. A lot of times, if we are looking at, especially the masters of, you know, the past of tonalism, a lot of times it's just a simple 3-value pattern. It's sky, ground, trees, often, or sky, water, ground, trees. So just start to observe it. It's also a really interesting thing to run pictures through, like just mentally of going, well, why does this picture not quite work? Which one of these things is out of whack? Okay, why is that? Oh, because it's snow, or it's birch trees, or, you know, really, really, really light hay, you know, can really change the values of things. Like really light hay will appear oftentimes, or light grasses like we have right now at the kind of end of fall where they're all bleached out and dead. They'll appear lighter than the sky sometimes. So I'll just run it through, you know, look at it in black and white possibly, or decide, do I want to add a little more color to the grass or, you know, whatever else, or lighten my sky more. Let's go back to share screen. All right, back to Facebook here. And I've grabbed a couple examples here. This is starting off with a good buddy of mine, Don Bishop, another gentleman. This is the gentleman who challenged me to do just values when I was out plein air painting. He paints a lot of these, a lot of fields and trees as well. Very nice. He has a definite poetry. He is not afraid to lean in towards kind of a minimalism. He definitely gets away of all the extraneous junk or anything else that's not telling his story. And anyways, I just wanted to grab this because here we go. We've got our lightest light up in the sky. And if we squint our eyes, it always makes it a little easier to see our values because we're looking through our eyelashes. It's just like when you get too close to a screen that's on your back door and everything gets a little bit more simplified, if you've ever noticed that. So by squinting our eyes, we simplify our values. So when artists are squinting, that's what they're doing, is helping simplify their values. You know, it's worth it. We'll all get crow's feet together, but it's worth it because our paintings will be nicer. So you got the lightest light in the sky. And then the second is the flat plains and kind of the tops of some of these trees. The third being his hill. And then of course, the darkest being the shadows in the upright plains. And even brings in little bits of that into the foreground to kind of give our field a little bit of a sense of depth. All right. There he is again. So this was an example where the hill is probably even lighter than the tops of these grasses because it's very atmospheric. So we want to be aware of if it's not, you know, darker than the uprights, why is that? It's usually going to be because there's fog or the placement of the sun in the picture or whatnot. But let's just go with this as a 3-value painting. At the lights in the sky, the little bit darker on the ground, and then the shadows in the uprights. And then again, if you look at the value of the grasses, squinting our eyes, they're closer to the tops of the trees. A lot of times I will keep my trees a little more distinct, a little darker than the tops of my grasses, just as an often general rule. This is a reference that I'm actually probably going to do next week. So maybe don't use this one this week, unless you really like it and want to do it. It doesn't have our mountain in it. And this is a photo that I manipulated pretty hard. I think there's a couple different examples. I just love this design for some reason. It's a strange, odd design. You can see a path back here, which I've painted it before and just ignored that path. I didn't like that hard line there. But anyways, coming back to that, this is another one. This is a tiny piece of a bigger photo, and the rest of the photo I just threw away. Didn't like it, but I loved just the kind of meandering path of light as it's going through there, or conversely, the meandering shadow pattern. I like that sense of depth. Maybe I would open this up or change it, but it also doesn't really have our far back hill, mountain or anything, but you can see as things, the darker, they get a little bit lighter as they go back. Again, horrible quality photo, but this to me offers a lot of opportunity for making things up and pushing things. So anyways, I grabbed that. Another one that I manipulated pretty hard. This was actually during the fire season in Wyoming. This is right outside Jackson Hole. I think it's called Mormon Row or something in the Teton National Park. But it was sunrise during the smoke. And I just love the variation in the dark. So you got the lightest light in the sky. And then I love how the hills have their little variations as the atmosphere kind of comes forward, and the darks in the uprights. But again, there's quite a bit of atmosphere between us and these trees. And then this is a nearly dry creek bed. You know, the water was really low. And so I've had to kind of mess with that from time to time. But this is one I think I will probably do today as one of my references. And this is the other one I'm going to do today as a reference. And this one's, this is where I was talking about, see that if we squint our eyes, the flat area, this is almost a no-tan almost. It's almost like a 2-value painting. we squint our eyes, it's just like light and dark. And so the ground plane here is very, very similar to the far back hills. So in my painting, I'm probably going to come through and lighten the tops of these grasses another step so that they separate out. I also will probably make these mountains a little bluer and grayer as they fall back, not quite as warm a color. And then there's a lot of interesting things in this that I want to deal with, like this whole band of pokey grass in the foreground. I don't really think that that's very welcoming. So maybe I will just clear out this whole bunch of grasses here. This can get really messy. This tree shape's not all that interesting. So there's a lot of things I can deal with. Maybe I'll just, get rid of this tree here. Maybe I just don't need it. Maybe I'll crop off over to here and crop into here. And because the main thing here is for me is the sky and the water are really interesting. And then you get a little bit of a sense of movement with the shadow sides of there. Does that make sense? Cool, going really fast, sorry. Unfortunately, I don't know the name of this artist. The name was kind of cut off. I can make some guesses. But anyways, again, we're just going to quickly run through these. Lightest light, the sky, then down into the ground, then into the tops of things, right? And then the darks being the uprights being the darkest. And you see how that structure, that idea of 4 values just really helps it read. Our brain just automatically goes, landscape, right? It only takes the 4 values. Any questions or comments so far?
I have a question.
Sure.
I like this 4 value approach to analyzing, composing your paintings and how you go about it. But what if you do a lot of dark skies? In other words, your sky is really dark. What does that do to your value pattern? Does that mean?
Yeah, the great thing is you still get to run it by just saying, okay, well, this element is different. So what is that doing to the other things? So yeah, are you talking like a stormy sky, like a stormy clouds, and then it's being front lit, or what are you?
I'm talking about skies that are purple or Prussian blue. So yes, in that sense, a storm is coming, but you don't have a lot of clouds, so it's sort of solid color. What does that do? Does that mean that your ground should be a lot lighter to sort of balance out the light and dark?
It depends 100% on your light source.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be question 1, is where is my light source? So are the clouds not being hit by light, or is it a nocturne? Maybe there's not even really a strong light source. Yeah, so I would be curious to see kind of a reference or maybe an example of a painting, but there are a number of artists who do paint like stormy dark clouds, but oftentimes they'll be face lit or side lit. And so just being aware of what's going on in that. And oftentimes what we think of as a dark sky is still not nearly as dark as the shadow, the uprights and things like that.
Right.
Rarely is the sky going to be your darkest thing.
Okay, that makes sense.
Michael?
Yes.
Yeah, that picture, when I look at it, the first thing I see is that tree distracts that's like the focus.
This dark form here.
Yeah, is that, in your opinion, my eye's not pulled over by any other dark in that painting.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the focus. He's also the only area that has red in it, this reddish brown. Yeah, he's definitely trying to keep us in this area because the focus is going to be where you have the strongest contrast, and it could be contrast of edge, strong edge quality. So the focus is generally, whether or not we care, is right here. So you got your darkest and your lightest area closest together.
Oh, I see.
So that draws us, and then we move around from in there. But yeah, it's an interesting design. I don't know if I would have lined my trees up so perfectly. I would have probably moved this red tree over a little bit or maybe brought it out. I don't know. It's an interesting design. I just kind of grabbed it because it has the values kind of in play. Aaron Schur, I've been lucky enough to get to paint with this gentleman, really great painter. He's paints outdoors a lot. He also does pastels. This might even be a pastel, actually, I believe. I think I've grabbed a couple pastels pastelists in this, but yeah, very beautiful value structure. If we turn this into black and white, again, I don't have my Photoshop on my computer yet because I have to buy it. But you can still just imagine it or squint your eyes at it. You can see that lightest light in the sky. Right behind it, though, this grass is really quite bright and quite light. And then the mountains back there, and then the shadows in the upright plains. Great. We'll go through these pretty quickly. That one picked back up. This is the other one I'm contemplating doing today. I just love the value structure as it recedes back into space on this. And oftentimes I've painted this painting 2 or 3 times. I love this scene just because of the zigzagging shadows. And you're really free with all these fields. You don't have to make them all wheatgrass. You know, I've come back in and made like one field reddish, one field, you know, make kind of a tapestry in there, kind of a quilting. And so I find this to be a lot of fun. I usually will paint from black and white to do it. But anyways, this is a fine painter named Jane Hunt. She's kicking butt these days. She's winning all the competitions, or at least placing in all the competitions. And she really loves clouds. She's doing a number of things now, but she's come a long ways with just these big, beautiful, interesting clouds that she does. And I think she's really excelled at, and I don't want to call it simple by any means, but using this 4 value system, you know, the lightest light in the skies, then getting down to the tree grasses, you know, and you kind of got to ignore what's happening with the shadows and the clouds a little bit. And then, you know, the darkest darks in the uprights. And that really is what helps the painting to read, is the shadows, right? They remember the shadows or the darks give us our form. The darks give us our structure. The shadows do, or the darks and the shadows, whatever you want to call it, do the heavy lifting. They give us our structure on which to build. And again, the values do all the work, the colors get all the credit, right? John Poon. This is an example of, boy, if we turn this to black and white, that grass is going to be, that tops of these golden grasses are going to be nearly as light. And, you know, the backlights in here. So what I do oftentimes is I kind of look into the shadows a little bit and see where the structure lies, because this doesn't fall apart, right? It still reads really nicely, even though the grasses are just about as light or bright as the sky, and so are these far back bright, you know, hillsides are still really quite light if we squint our eyes. But what's happening is that little band of shadows back there on the trees, the bands of cast shadows on the grasses and things really help the light areas to still read and give us some structure. And then he's got these strong upright darks intermixed to really kind of ground everything and give us a feeling of solidity, right? If you didn't have those, just kind of take your finger and cover those trees, and things kind of start to float off a little bit. It gets really airy and really soft. So sometimes a little bit of shadow, a little bit of dark will really do the trick. Mark Bonet, I just love his paintings. It's funny because, you know, he's a lot of crisper edges than I do, but I love his atmosphere and everything else. And this one's just a great example. Again, lightest lights, value 2 on the upright or the flat plains, and then getting back towards the tree, the far back mountain, and things getting lighter as they go back. And then you got the nice, strong, dense shadows in his uprights, kind of rolling over to the lighter on the top. So really nice, different example. He's really playing up color as well as value. So not all these are really tonalist. I don't know, this could be argued that it's not really tonalism. So it's got blues and reds and greens and yellows, but you know, I still love it. That's what I mean. I'm just not really a purist when it comes to like pure tonalism or pure anything else. I mislabeled this. This is not, I don't believe this is actually Ramona Youngquist. Let me see if I can figure out really quickly who may have painted this one, if I have their name. It was when I was just seeing the little thumbnail, I thought, oh, it's Mark Boges, I think, Boedges. But again, just nice, quick example. This one's being face lit, meaning the light is behind us. a little more. It's kind of up and behind us. You can see by the cast shadows, the fact that the houses are face lit and the trees are lit on our side and the clouds are lit on our side. So that first question of where is my light source? But he's still got the lights in the skies that are generally the lightest. Then you've got the flats of the grasses. You went ahead and pushed to make the focal area a little more interesting by bringing in a little higher chroma, meaning it's a little purer green versus the kind of earthier greens out and around. You notice he also softens his edges, softens his edges, softens his edges, softens his edges, kind of along the periphery, and keeps the sharper areas in contrast in here. So nice framing device, Mr. I don't know how to say your last name for sure, but Mark. Let's see, I think we're gonna get Ramon, nope. Phil Bates, another pastelist. I just wanted to bring in some high color, high contrast, but it's still kind of the same thing, lightest, second, third, fourth, right? So it's just kind of a quick way to test and see. Again, it doesn't always work. You've got to decide, where is my light source? What is it hitting? Renato, sorry, Muccillo. So any Italian speakers in our group?
Mucciello.
Mucciello, that's way cooler than I would have said it. Mucciello. Sounds like a delicious frozen lemony drink. Awesome. He's an amazing painter. If you don't know Renato's work, definitely check him out. Yeah, I've been a big fan of his stuff for some time. This is an interesting one with these, making these greens. Like he made the algae very special in this painting. And I would normally think, oh gosh, how do I get rid of all this algae floating in this pond? You know, do I just ignore it or what do I do? But he made it special. And, you know, it's a little interesting that it's just in the bottom half of the painting. There's no green anywhere else. But yeah, he's awesome. And he's using some like you do, Michelle, with letting some of the texture of his underpainting show through quite a bit in his trees, that he's using these kind of interesting choppy brushes and stuff. And he covers it where he doesn't want it and then lets some of that show through. So I enjoy watching him paint. He has a couple little short videos and things. And you can just tell he's somewhat experimental, but he's kind of going for that implied sense of detail and realism as well. And sometimes he uses really, really tiny brushes and really just does grass, you know, by little reed. But anyways, the values in here really reading, really working well together, aren't they? You see how that just continues to work? Lightest.
Michael,
Yes.
take a look at the sky holes in the big tree. The sky holes actually pick up the green tone in the algae.
They do a little bit, you're right. Yeah, that is interesting. And I actually did notice that a little bit. They're kind of muddy sky holes, but they kind of work just because there's less light getting through those passages. But yeah, they kind of do. It's an odd thing. And I don't know if that was intentional by let's just give him credit. Let's just say he knows what he's doing. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, that they're a little bit mucked up. Interesting. Richard McKinley, great painter. This is kind of a nice and almost just basic. This feels like a sketch that I would be so proud to have painted. Very beautiful. He's doing what Yvonne was talking about too. He's got these warm kind of transparent areas in his shadows. And then he came back in and added a little bit of density where he just wanted it. But you can see these reds are still reading like warm shadows. So you can tell he did kind of an earthy red underpainting in here, kind of a burgundy burnt umber underpainting. It's even showing up a little bit in the skies. Very nice. But yeah, let's look at those values, right? Lightest light in the skies and the water reflecting. Then we get to number 2, the tops of our grasses. And then 3, he actually let this go green versus blue, which is kind of interesting. And then the upright planes for the darks. You see how simple that is? And it still just works. All right, here's Ramona Youngquist, a friend of mine, another friend that I go out painting with Brenda Boylan and Don Bishop from time to time. And she's hopefully going to be able to join us in one of the classes and talk a little bit. It was a little bit harder to find her work that worked exactly because she doesn't often have a lot of hills and stuff, but and she does a lot of cast shadows in her foreground. So it's a little bit tough to find areas. But let's just look at the upright plains being our darkest. She's got upright plains along this creek and right in the foreground here, and then back to the trees back here. She keeps them really dark. She is not afraid to let her shadows stay dark well into her painting. Ramona really likes to play up strong contrasts, and so really nice. You'll know it's a Ramona Youngquist painting when it has the red flowers and a white house. Lots and lots of those used to great effect. There's lots of these kind of old farm style homes out in this part of Oregon and just west and south of where I live, southwest of where I live. Very nice. This is another one of Ramona's. And again, this just really speaks to where I live out here on the edge of the west side of Portland. Right on the edge of the kind of urban growth boundary and the farm country and stuff. And a lot of our rolling hills just really feel like this. So I really enjoy looking at her work because she sees things just differently enough than I do that it's fun to see what she's attracted to that I might just drive by and not even notice. Do you see the values breaking down? You know, the lights hitting the sides of these barns, and there's probably metal, so they're really quite light. The light is coming from the left side. These are cast shadows from trees that we're not even seeing over here on the left of us, or maybe it's another big barn or something. This tree in the shadows, the sheep are even picking up some of the light, and yeah, really nice.
I noticed on that the shadows on that little to the right of the road on the ground slightly go up, and so in my mind that's the shadows, the cast shadows of the trees on the land. See the cast shadows of the big tree on the land to the right of the road?
It sure could be. I think maybe there's a
down
little
on the right side, my right, your left.
Yeah, the shadow from a tree we don't see. You're right.
But it goes up, kind of it angles up, and so that makes it look like a hill, right?
Yep. Yeah, you can definitely kind of feel that there's a hill, and then the road kind of goes up that way as well.
Yeah, because it's just interesting, like that part of the cast shadow on the road from the big tree in the front is flat, and then it goes uphill after that.
Yep, very good catch. Very nice. Yeah, that doesn't that, because it would be much more quiet if this was just a straight line right here. The shadow was just a straight line across, and this was just a straight line. It would feel very different, wouldn't it? But this gives it just a little bit of a swooping motion, right? Little bit of diagonal line gives us a little more action, a little more sense of movement. That may be it. Let's see. Yep. Okie doke. Let's take a break, and I'll get to painting, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion and see what you guys think about that. So what time is it? 10:20. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Give me a chance to refill my coffee and my water and get up to the easel and get set up.
Thank you.
Oops.